Heavy boots thunder against the rotting floorboards of the Temple prison. It is July 3rd, 1793, Paris. The door strikes the wall, and 6 municipal guards storm the candlelit room to tear the 8-year-old Louis Charles from his mother's desperate grip. Marie Antoinette screams, fighting for an hour against the inevitable, shielding the boy with her own wasting body until exhaustion forces her to yield. This violence is not an execution. It is a prelude. While the world waits for the guillotine, the Committee of Public Safety initiates a darker protocol within these damp walls. She clutches a torn strip of black silk, a mourning patch for her dead husband, which will soon become the only flag of her resistance. Why was mere death insufficient for the architects of the terror? And what monstrous confession were they willing to manufacture to justify her total erasure? The blade kills the body, but silence destroys the soul. If you enjoy these dark histories, leave a like and subscribe and comment below where you're listening from. And now, back to the story. In the deepest hours of the night on August 2nd, 1793, the transfer begins. Marie Antoinette is awoken at the Temple prison and ordered to dress. There is no fanfare, only the hurried shuffle of boots and the scratching of quills on transfer papers. She is moved to the Conciergerie, the grim fortress known throughout Paris as the Antechamber of Death. The sensory shift is absolute. The temple held the memory of a palace. The Conciergerie smells of the Seine River's rot, unwashed bodies, and ancient stone. She is led down slippery steps into a semi-subterranean cell, damp and dim, where the light of day struggles to penetrate the barred windows at street level. The institutional machinery immediately begins to grind away her identity. The prison registry does not list a Queen of France, nor an Archduchess of Austria. It lists prisoner number 280. To the jailers, she is simply the Widow Capet. Every personal possession is cataloged and confiscated. A small gold watch, a pocket mirror, a lock of hair, all taken. She is left with only the clothes on her back and that hidden scrap of black silk pinned inside her bodice, a secret reliquary of her former life that the guards initially overlook. Her new world is defined by a total, suffocating lack of privacy. The cell is divided only by a flimsy, waist-high screen. On one side, 2 gendarmes drink, smoke clay pipes, and play cards, specifically ordered never to let her out of their sight for a single second. On the other side, a woman dying of tuberculosis and grief tries to maintain the rituals of a human being. She must wash, dress, and use the bucket behind the screen, hearing the men breathe and spit just feet away. The air grows thick with stale tobacco smoke, choking her already failing lungs. Solitude is a luxury denied to the damned. Yet, in this squalor, a quiet will to resist hardens like cooling iron. She refuses to engage with the guards, denying them the satisfaction of her fear. She creates a rigid routine to combat the chaos. She mends her decaying black dress with a single needle obtained through oversight, focusing on the stitch to ignore the coughing blood. Records suggest she suffers from frequent hemorrhages, likely advanced uterine cancer, turning the damp straw of her mattress into a site of constant, silent humiliation. Yet, she scrubs her shoes. She maintains a regal posture on a wooden stool. To succumb to the filth is to admit guilt. The captors, however, possess a weapon sharper than the cold or the damp. They hint at news of her children. The guards let slip rumors of the Dauphin, her son, suggesting that cooperation might yield a letter, a visit, or merely information about his health. It is a calculated mercy. They do not want her comfortable. They want her leverageable. They dangle the safety of her children to see if the queen will trade her secrets for a mother's peace. She does not know that the mercy they offer is a fiction, concealing a price she cannot yet fathom. Hope is the cruelest instrument of the torturer. The Revolutionary Tribunal convenes on October 14, 1793, in a hall suffocating with the heat of packed bodies and the stench of unwashed wool. The air is thick with the anticipation of a spectacle, but the proceedings begin with a grinding monotony. For 15 hours, the prosecutor, Fouquier-Tinville, hammers prisoner 280 with questions regarding the depletion of the treasury and secret correspondence with Austria. These are political crimes, the expected currency of a fallen regime. Marie Antoinette answers with a terrifying calm, her voice low but steady, her fingers absently tracing the fabric of her black dress. She admits nothing, she signs nothing. The physical toll of the dungeon is evident, her eyesight is failing, and she requests water frequently. But her discipline remains an impenetrable wall. The tribunal realizes that charges of treason are insufficient to destroy the symbol she represents. To kill the queen is a political act. To obliterate the woman, they must engineer a moral atrocity. This is where the true price of the offered mercy is revealed. The reason they separated her from her son in Act 1 was not merely for security, but for reconstruction. In the weeks of isolation, the cobbler Simon, the boy's jailer, has plied the 8-year-old Louis Charles with alcohol and revolutionary rhetoric, twisting his confused memories into a weapon. The hidden evidence the prosecution now unveils is a deposition signed by the child's shaky hand, accusing his mother of incestuous corruption. The accusation drops into the silence of the courtroom like a stone into deep water. Jacques Heir, the radical journalist, reads the charges with a smirk, detailing acts of depravity supposedly committed against the heir to the throne. The objective is total dehumanization, to paint the Austrian woman not just as a tyrant, but as a monster violating the laws of nature itself. If the crowd believes this, no one will mourn her. The monarchy will die, not as a tragedy, but as an infection excised from the body politic. The judges lean forward, waiting for the breakdown, the scream, or the shame that will validate their theater. A lie spoken by a child is the hardest to refute. Marie Antoinette remains silent. She does not look at Heir. She does not look at the jury. For moments that stretch into eternities, the only sound is the scratching of the clerk's quill. One of the jurors, dissatisfied with her lack of reaction, presses her to answer the specific charge regarding her son. The trap is sprung. To deny it is to call her son a liar. To accept it is death. She does not debate. She slowly rises from her seat, her emaciated frame suddenly commanding the chaotic hall. She turns not to the judges, but to the gallery, to the market women and fishwives who have come to knit and watch her die. Her voice cuts through the stale air, sharp and undeniable. "If I have not replied," she says, "it is because nature itself refuses to answer such a charge laid against a mother." She pauses, her gaze sweeping the faces of the women who hate her. "I appeal to all mothers who may be present here." The effect is instantaneous and catastrophic for the prosecution. The attempt to break her has inverted the dynamic entirely. Instead of a monster, the crowd sees a mother defending herself against an unthinkable obscenity. The market women, the fiercest drivers of the revolution, fall into a stunned murmur. Some weep. The silence that follows is not the silence of submission, but the silence of shared shame. The black silk she wears is no longer a badge of defeat. It has become armor against the filth they throw at her. The judges hastily move the trial forward, burying the moment under procedural noise. They have failed to destroy her spirit, so they must now rush to destroy her body before the mood of the mob shifts permanently. The verdict was written before the trial began, but the moral victory has been snatched from the Republic's hands. She sits back down, the brief fire fading into the gray endurance of the condemned. She has survived the test, but she knows the outcome remains unchanged. She has preserved her dignity, but she has sealed her doom. Truth is no shield against a blade that has already been sharpened. It is 4:30 a.m., October 16th, 1793. The candle in the cell has burned down to a stump of tallow and wick. Marie Antoinette has been returned to the Conciergerie not to sleep, but to wait. The verdict was death, as expected. The sentence is immediate. In these final hours, the surveillance relaxes just enough to allow a singular, quiet oversight. She asks the gendarme Bowl for a pen and paper. Surprisingly, he obliges. Here, in the heavy silence before the dawn, she performs her final rite. It is not a religious sacrament. The priest sent to her is a constitutional priest, a puppet of the Republic whom she refuses to acknowledge, but a rite of memory. She sits on the edge of the cot, using her knees as a desk. The black silk of her mourning dress brushes against the damp floor as she bends over the paper. Her hand, which once signed treaties and patronized operas, now trembles with exhaustion and cold. Yet the script is legible. the thoughts lucid. She begins to write a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. This document, catalogued today in the National Archives under the reference AE 2, 1384, reveals the woman stripped of the crown. There is no rage in the ink. There is no political manifesto. Instead, she writes of duty. She urges her children to forgive her killers. She writes, "I pardon my enemies the evils that they have done me." The text is spotted with small circular blurs. Historians have long debated whether these are tears or merely the erratic flow of a cheap prison quill. It does not matter. The intent is a final transmission of love to the survivors of the wreck. She pours her remaining life into these words, folding the paper with the reverence of a prayer, believing she has secured a legacy of forgiveness for her son. A message sent is not always a message received. She hands the folded letter to Bol, trusting the chain of command to deliver it. This is the tragic pivot of the final morning. Bol, fearful for his own neck, does not deliver it to Elizabeth. He hands it directly to Fouquier-Tinville, the prosecutor. The letter is not sent. It is filed. It disappears into the bureaucratic maw of the terror, buried under stacks of arrest warrants. Madame Elizabeth will never read it. She will follow the Queen to the guillotine months later, unaware of this final absolution. The Queen's last act of agency is intercepted, her voice silenced before the blade even falls. With the letter gone, the final transformation begins. She cannot die in the black dress. It is tattered, and the symbols of mourning are too political for the scaffold. She must dress in white, the color of the queens of France in mourning, yes, but also the color of martyrdom. She moves behind the screen. The guards, in a final act of petty cruelty, refuse to look away, forcing her to change her undergarments under their gaze. She manages to hide the blood-stained linen, evidence of her failing body. In a gap in the wall, a desperate attempt to keep her physical decay private, she emerges in a loose, white piqué dress, a simple lawn cap on her head. The gray hair is cut short by the executioner, Henri Sanson, who binds her hands behind her back. The ropes are thick and rough. They bite into the wrists that just moments ago held the pen. The black silk is left behind in the cell, a shed skin. She is no longer the widow Capet. She is something harder, colder, and entirely alone. She steps toward the door, leaving the damp stone for the crisp autumn air. The history you know is written in ink. The history you feel is written in blood. The tumbril rattles over the cobblestones of the Rue Saint-Honoré. It is a rough, open cart, a final indignity designed to expose her to the filth of the street and the jeers of the mob. She sits with her back to the horses, her hands bound so tightly the circulation fails, her eyes fixed on the horizon of rooftops. High in a window, the artist Jacques-Louis David sketches her passing. He captures no royal grandeur, only the slump of the jaw and the jagged cut of her hair. It is a hurried series of graphite lines, a silent testimony to a woman hollowed out by the months in the dark. At the Place de la Révolution, the crowd is vast, a sea of red caps waiting for the final act. She climbs the scaffold steps with a lightness that belies the ruin of her body. In the confusion of the platform, she steps on the executioner's foot. "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." These are her last words, not a curse upon the revolution, nor a plea for salvation, but a reflex of courtesy from a vanished world. The blade falls at 12:15 p.m. The roar of the mob is deafening, but it is the last sound she will ever hear. The erasure begins before the blood is dry. Her body is not given to her family. It is tossed into a handcart and wheeled to the Madeleine cemetery. The head is placed between the legs. There is no stone. The gravediggers cover the remains in quicklime, a chemical fire meant to consume flesh and bone rapidly, preventing the site from becoming a shrine. The cost of the burial is recorded in the municipal ledger. Coffin for the widow Capet, 6 livres. The price of a queen is reduced to the cost of pine boards and caustic powder. The letter she wrote in Act 5 lies unread in a government drawer, where it will sit in darkness for 20 years before being found. The black silk she fought for in Act 1 has vanished, replaced by the white dust of the lime pit. The screams of the temple are silenced. The confession they sought to manufacture never materialized, so they settled for the annihilation of the evidence. The Republic washed the blood from the stones, but the stains seeped into the mortar, indelible and cold. The boot has left the neck, but the impression remains in the dust. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like. History buries its dead, but it never sleeps.